And that went about as well as it possibly could have done, right?
Yes, it did. Yeah.
Talk about the experience of it. You know, it's a record in terms of your first-time US share sale for a foreign entity. We keep saying that, but the mechanics of it, a feat, difficult to pull off?
Well, I think a lot of the mechanics will be the underwriters. So let's give them all the credit in the world. JPMorgan running this transaction primarily as a stabilization agent. Not only stabilizing this trade, but they were the orchestrator, let's call it that. You know, our job is to provide the capacity, the technology. You saw behind you the human intelligence and making sure that everyone knows what's happening with full transparency. So all the book runners can communicate with their customers, which is, the buy side and the investors who are making the bet on SK Hynix.
Celebrations continuing behind us.
It's going to continue for a while, I think.
No, it's good. It's interesting. Like this isn't very sophisticated, but it's a Friday. You know, does that play into it at all? What are we seeing in the activity around that?
I think most deals will price and trade on a Wednesday or a Thursday. Friday's not typical, especially during the summer. But I think you get to a deal of this size that has captivated the market. It had tremendous institutional interest. So I think it could have, any day of the week would have been fine for SK Hynix.
Nelson, one of the things I started the conversation with Chairman Che on was the idea that on an ongoing basis, ADRs are an interesting mechanism for them in the capital markets. And essentially what Chairman Che said was, well, we'll look at some stability and give it some time, but yes. How would that work, the idea that you come back to the market on whatever cadence they choose?
Sure. Well, companies typically will come back to the market. They'll be evaluating where they're going to get the best valuation for those shares, whether it's in their local market or an ADR market. But the typical technology IPO will come back to the market several times to raise capital. This is a very seasoned public company. So they'll go through all those mechanics, say where is the best place if they do need to raise capital. It could be the debt markets, it could be the equity markets, and hopefully it's ADRs in the US.
Do we need to make anything of where they price the ADR? This morning on the Bloomberg, it was about this idea, okay, this is a 3% premium over where the common shares and SOL closed. The ADRs represent a tenth of one SOL common share. You know, the backstory is how much money do you or do you not leave on the table?
That's always the question, right, for companies. And typically, if it's an IPO, let's say it's not an ADR, we'll benchmark off their current public comps. This had a combination. Okay, so what is the equity trading in Korea? Also, you have a large U.S. comp in Micron. So how do you find that balance? And that's where, again, I think JPMorgan did a very nice job here getting the price to a point where we've seen some nice upward price action. It's very stable at the moment, and I think they did just a great job.
Chairman Che made an interesting point about maybe the rationale also for doing this, which was not just the capital, the proceeds raised, but introducing SK to the American people, essentially. That was in the context of the talent perspective, right? A pipeline of talented people that might work for the company. From the Nasdaq side and your involvement through the process, how much do you take that into account?
Quite a bit, and most companies will take that into account. So you look at being on a public stage. The global capital markets public is about 150 trillion in market cap. The U.S. is 70% of that. I think being a public company in the U.S. does show as you want to attract talent. They're making significant investments in the U.S. Having a U.S. currency to do that is a big deal. And even a traditional IPO puts the brand component as one of the major reasons why they think about tapping the public markets.
There is another big memory name and chip name in South Korea. It's called Samsung. How much have you been talking to them about doing something similar?
We never talk about names on camera or in public until it becomes a point where it is public. But I think if you look at having moments where you have a successful offering, it does open up the eyes of others to say, does this make sense for us? So at the very least, companies who have an international listing will say, how does this correlate to us? Do we have an investor pool to tap into? Do we want to think about the brand aspects? And then understanding, do they want to do another offering? So,
is there, more broadly, a pipeline, do you think, of technology companies outside of the United States that are looking at this and thinking this is, getting that fair valuation?
Yeah, so I was actually just in Europe this week and meeting with a lot of companies. And if you look at this year, of the top 10 raises, 4 have been international. Now, 3 of them, this is one of them with SK Hynix, but you had Bending Spoons go public, PayPay, INEO, very large deals that felt the U.S. capital markets gave them the best valuation. I think we're having more of those conversations than ADR type listings, but both have a lot of momentum behind them.
Is there a different speeds in those markets, Asian technology versus European technology, that you're seeing?
No, I wouldn't say that. I think most of the European ones are more the startup companies that have not listed anywhere yet. So they really look at the U.S. as a primary first listing, maybe the only listing. I think we do look at a lot of companies in Asia might have a local listing, and they think about ADRs.
I got one very quick niche question for you the team sent over, which is how is Nasdaq thinking about the prospect of more leveraged single name products, ETFs? It's something that comes up a lot and has this week.
Leverage products under
a single name ETF for tech companies in particular.
Yeah, we look at where the market demand is for things like that. If there's market demand and it's a product that we think is going to be appropriate for the market, regulated, Nasdaq is a participant in innovation. We look at how we address market needs.